actual auction itself and leading up to the auction, you could just feel it in the air, this excitement. You never know what's really going to happen because people keep their cards very close to their chest. I knew there was going to be interest, I knew it was going to do well, but I never anticipated how well it was going to do.
The most prized of the Vincents is undoubtedly a Black Lightning. This example, which I saw in the flesh when it was in France, is quite amazing because it's original. And race bikes, as you can imagine, they get knocked around. And this has got all its battle scars. That's why this one's so special. A, it's a record setter. B, it's a Black Lightning. And C, it's just as it was when it set records, and I don't think there's another motorcycle like this.
The motorcycle in question, the Ehret Lightning, back in the summer of 2017, I received a phone call from a guy called Patrick Godet, very well-known Vincent restorer, Vincent Maestro, and his client had this motorcycle that he'd mechanically restored but cosmetically left it alone. And I don't think I could have been in my car on the Eurotunnel faster. I walk into this immaculate workshop and there is the bike up on a pedestal as it should be, surrounded by all of its original parts, the sidecar, all the cowling off the machine, all their untouched original paint, still with Ehret's annotations over it, framed by this old packing crate with the Vincent stamp on it. I mean, it was just incredible. One of those moments where you get shivers down your spine.
So the post-war Vincent, when it was introduced, if you think about the environment, certainly in England, was incredibly tough for people. There was rationing, there was a housing shortage. A lot of people were coming back from the war, either damaged mentally or damaged physically. Call it the genius or call it the sheer chutzpah. Philip Vincent decided that what the world needed was this motorcycle that would do 110 miles an hour, cost the same as a small house, and would use up whatever little petrol coupons you had. The other great thing he had was this, I think, romanticism. You know, he could see that a motorcycle could be more than just a very fast vehicle, so he gave them these wonderful names like Black Lightning, Black Shadow. There was a mystique to the brand Vincent, and I think Vincent was very adept at creating the mystique. Vincent motorcycles set records around the world. So records in Brazil, in Ireland, in Belgium, in France, in America, in Australia. So there was a cohort of people who would read about somebody else doing this, thinking, if I got a Vincent, I could do that. One of the most interesting, successful Vincent record setters was Rolly Free. It's one of the most famous pictures in motorcycling, possibly the most famous. Him at the Bonneville Salt Flats with a swimming cap and swimming trunks and what looked like kind of basketball boots on. Jack Ehret is in the same tradition, wanted to be the fastest person in Australia on two wheels.
Jack Ehret was a motorcycle dealer. He was also clearly a speed freak and adrenaline junkie. And Land Speed Records sold bikes. The previous record was around 122 miles an hour. Other Vincents are going faster than that, and I'm sure that's what would have inspired him to make this record attempt. Why is the Vincent Black Lightning the holy grail of motorcycling? There were only ever 33 examples produced. There are only 19 correct examples still in existence, and it's on every collector's wish list. This particular example of a Vincent Black Lightning was produced in 1951. The bike had a fantastic history. We knew every single owner from when this machine was built at the factory. It was an Australian guy called Tony McAlpine. He took it back to Australia, where he then sold it to another chap who owned it for only a short period of time, and then went to another Australian vehicle dealer before Jack Ehret came along and bought the machine. He then had it for the next 47, 50 years and did the Australian Land Speed Records, which was just over 141 miles an hour. We had the original wheels, the original cowling, tank, saddle, all of these parts which are incredibly hard to find. The previous record for a motorcycle at auction was for a 1915 Cyclone that was sold in 2012 for $851,000.
Jack Ehret, speed record-breaking Vincent, 1951 Black Lightning.
We had guys from the UK, America, Australia, mainland Europe, all interested in acquiring this motorcycle.
Yes, 500,000.
It really came alive around the $550,000, $600,000 mark, because that's where the real bidding battle started to take place between a gentleman in the audience and a gentleman on the phone.
580. Does it stay here in the US?
The whoops and the cheers, and when it got to around $790,000, $800,000, the guy in the room was shaking his head, and the auctioneer, said, "Just one more, sir?"
At $830,000, are you sure? One more? One more? $835,000.
When Philip Vincent passed away in 1979, he didn't think these motorcycles would be forgotten, and he always thought there would be a market for them. Now, I don't think he could have predicted the sort of prices that this motorcycle's fetched, but he did know that these things were special. He probably knew that nothing like it would be built again.
At $840,000. United States of America, you're done. Great Britain, you're out. Well done, the Aussies.
A little introduction to this motorcycle, but before we go on, I'd actually like to introduce our special guest, which you might think is the Vincent, but it's actually not. It's actually John Ehret. Now, this is Jack Ehret's son, who is a formidable racer himself, and has agreed to come along and talk about his father's motorcycle and little bits about it. Now, obviously, this is something that you because basically all those records were done sort of before you were born, or is that just a story you are trying to spin?
No, Dad wrapped up racing about 6 years before I was born, and it's nice to watch the video because I get to look at the old family snaps with my mum and stuff in it. So it's really good. And I don't know about being a formidable racer, although like everybody else that raced, I'm going faster back then now than I ever was back then, but it was good fun. I guess from my perspective, the best day I ever had was when Dad went out to Eastern Creek, I think it was about 1993, and he was going to run the sidecar. And I was racing moderns at the time, modern sidecars, and I was going to swing for him. And we went out and did a couple of laps, and he was pushing 70 and came back in. He said, "Oh, no. Do you want the bike for the weekend?" I said, "Yep." So I rang up my passenger, Evelyn Schultz, who's herself a very formidable racer. She's done a few land speed records and things. And she came out, and we managed to win the historic handicap sidecar race on it, and it was the best buzz I've ever had. And the race strategy was, if we blow the engine, just jump the fence, keep running, don't look back. That was the only strategy we had that day. But I remember all the stories that Dad used to tell, the problems that he had setting the record when he broke the gear shift, and they had to use the indicator lever to change gears. They had problems with plugs. There was a run back to Sydney to get parts and things. The story that he would tell, and I've actually got the original newspaper clippings at home from when Jeff Duke came out and they were at Mount Druitt together. And Dad had a bit of a rough start, but they both started progressively lowering the lap record at Mount Druitt, and I think they had the equal lap record at the end of the day, and I think it still stood when they closed the circuit. So there's a lot of history with the bike. I remember being out at Oran Park when it was a wet day, I think it was about 1978 or 79, and he just kept lapping everybody out there and having good fun. He liked to ride. He's a very good rider. So.
And also, obviously, what makes this so significant, as was pointed out in the video, is you've got to remember these are race bikes. Now, most race bikes are crashed, blown up, whatever. This is so, I mean, I suspect that this is probably the only one like this. This was never crashed, never blown up, although I did have a phone call from a bloke through the week who said he saw your dad testing this out at an airfield. And it was somewhere out of Penrith, he said.
I think Castlereagh.
Yeah.
I think I've got the photographs of that at home. Look, a lot of people probably don't know it. Dad had a Rapide, and being a fitter and turner from Garden Island, he'd patterned the cams and everything like that. he actually had the Rapide going as fast as he had the Lightning going, and he would tune them a little bit differently, and he'd probably go out there and try and work out which was going faster on the day and then take that out and run it. But he did have a philosophy. I'm lucky enough to have one of the other very special bikes he had, a Shelsey Walsh Matchless, which I think there's about 13 engines made. There's probably only 3 or 4 left in the world. Ross Pentecost used to run one. I don't know where Ross's bike is this day, but I'd love to find out. I've got a bit of cash. I don't know whether I can
Anyone
get
out there? Yeah.
But one of the things Dad always believed in, he didn't believe in playing with them. He left them standard. A lot of people will get bikes and they'll try and tweak them, get them going fast to play with the cams and that. He didn't do it. He left them that way and he just rode them. And the story about how he got the Lightning was, as anybody in here know Dad at all? Marge would have known that he liked to hang around the odd pub, and the way he acquired the bike was that he was in the pub one day, and apparently the bike was for sale in Sydney, along with a Manx Norton, and someone said to him, if you buy the 2 of those bikes, you're going to have the 2 fastest bikes in the country. And about 20 minutes later, he went home and he picked them up the next day. And I was just going to say, I think it was £1,000.
Which would have bought you a house then?
Probably close to it.
Yeah.
Maybe not in Randwick.
So it wasn't small change, was it?
No, well, that's right. I mean, he was making a lot of money out of racing at the time. I think, he was at Garden Island during the war, and then he started racing Speedway. And one of the things happened, they caught him with a foreign order. He had a Jap engine under his bench working for the Navy, and there was a long talk, and he said, you've got a big career here in Garden Island, you're earning £6 a week, you could be a supervisor and earn 7. And I think Dad was making about £30 on a Saturday night at the Speedway, and then backing up the next day and making about another £40, and he said, I'll just clean my bench out. That was it.
That was it, yeah. And of course, this thing, he would have run this on methanol at the time.
He did, yeah.
Which to those people who aren't used to running with methanol means they actually run a lot cooler. They're actually probably kinder to the engine in lots of ways, and that might have had something to do with the longevity. Now, also this engine was designed by an Australian, Phil Irving, and to those people who follow the superbikes, you might see the Ehret Vincent out there, which is now still winning superbike events. An incredible design, and one, the longevity of this thing is, it's really quite phenomenal. Now
I was just going to say that was one of the other good things. I turned up at Dad's place one day and he was sitting there having a chat with Phil. Phil had come up from Melbourne, and so I got to meet Phil Irving as well.
Phil Irving, yeah. And to anyone who's ever fiddled with a motorbike, get tuning for speed. It's the Bible.
I've got 3 copies.
Now, we actually have another very special guest here. Now, we'd like to introduce Marge Gaffey. Now, Marge actually worked with Jack Ehret, and has come along specially today, and knew Jack back in the day, and has been a motorcycle rider and racer, and only stopped riding her Matchless only a couple of years ago. And ladies and gentlemen, this is Marge Gaffey. I'm going to hand over to our chair here, Mr. Howard Collins.
Now, Marge, I've had a chat with you just before we got on air, as they say. And I hear that you were a pretty fast lady in your time.
Depending.
Now, when did you start working for Jack?
In the end of 50.
1950, 1951, around about then?
That's about it, yeah.
And what sort of job did you have what were you up to?
You did everything that the boys didn't want to do.
Well, they were down the pub, and you...
No, not the pub. Not then, I wasn't going to do it. But Jack was always in a hurry. He wanted everything done yesterday, it's got to be done now. But in those days, you couldn't get enough bikes to sell, and we were getting new ones in, and I'd have to take them to the rego. It was very convenient that he made the sidecar for the race bikes. I could get 2 bikes on then, with the wide chassis.
So you drove the sidecar outfit with these 2 bikes on.
Yeah.
And tell me the story about, you had to go and pick them up, but you had to avoid the police, so tell me about that. There no police in the audience? No, it's all right? Tell us about it. You used to pick them up?
Oh, yeah, but it was a very hazy thing what trade plates covered. You could put trade plates on anything and go where you liked, and none of the insurance people seemed to know what to do with them either. So, yeah.
And what outfit was this? What engine did it have on the outfit? Was it a Panther or something, or?
The Panther, yeah.
Panther.
It was the biggest wreck you've ever seen. But
Yeah, most people say they fired every lamppost, wasn't it? That sort of thing about a Panther.
Yeah, and it'd pull at anything.
And as you said, in short supply, Jack had a list as long as his arm of people who wanted a Vincent.
Oh, yes, of course. And he was cunning enough. He cashed in it pretty quick when he got the record. And there wasn't one for sale in Australia, I don't think, only even in New South Wales. And he talked some poor old bloke, came in to have a look, and he talked him into buying a square 4 aerial and saying they were just as good.
Now, one of the jobs you used to have to do is pick up a few bent and bashed bikes. You told me you picked up a Comet one day, a Vincent Comet. Tell me about that.
Oh, Jack would drop you somewhere with some wreck and you'd have to ride it back to the shop in Randwick. So this Comet, it had a bow in the bed that was that bent. They'd hit it about mid the telegraph pole. And as soon as I got back, where the hell have you been? Where you been? You could only turn around the left-hand corner. And I'd been right down near the tram depot and whatever.
Just follow the tram tracks, eh?
Oh, where have you been? I said, why didn't he let me ride the good bike back to the shop and him do it? But it never worked that way.
And it's true you rode motorcycles for quite a few years?
Yes, until I got this blasted thing.
Yeah, well, it's got a brake on that side. Is it clutch on the other, maybe? I don't know. Anyhow, fantastic, Marge. Great to have you here. Great to meet up with this young man. He hasn't aged a bit, has he, since you first met him? And Anthony, back to you. Thanks very much, Marge.
Thank you, Marge. Isn't that a great bit of history there?